Hey, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So glad to be here with all of you. Should be a great stream tonight. So hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell. We've got a few things to catch up on tonight. So that should be pleasant enough to do. Just a few things to catch up on. I see someone's already sent in a super chat about Maximilian Robespierre. So I'm writing that down. And yeah, let's go. Let's do it.
Century. I say that the century on which we are entering can be and must be the century of the common man.
A radical redistribution of economic power.
I mean, we know that racism is just a byproduct of capitalism. Everything would be all right if everything was put back in the hands of the people.
We need a government that will make sure Americans are taken care of and organize the economy to serve the people, not the profits of a wealthy few.
We now have the techniques and the resources to get rid of poverty.
We got to start getting out there with the people.
Get out of the movement and get to the masses.
We need a government of action.
Welcome, 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 everybody. So glad to have you here with us tonight. For those of you who may not be familiar with the way we do things, first I give opening remarks. That's just generally whatever I want to talk about tonight. Tonight we're going to show a lot of clips in the opening remarks, an update on world events. And after the opening remarks, I do the roll call, where we find out who's on the other side of the camera. I call you all out as I see you, names and locations, Always very exciting to find out who's watching. We always have a wide variety of people from different parts of the world, different parts of the United States watching. And so we do that. That's always a lot of fun. And then after that, the second half of the show is just me answering your super chat questions for the rest of the night. So, I've already got my first super chat about Maximilian Robespierre, wrote it down. If you have something you want me to talk about in the second half of the show, by all means do so. By all means do so. That's what makes the second half of our program so lively. So shoot me a super chat. I will write it down and they'll get added to the list. Keep the super chats rolling in because that's what makes the second half of our show so amazing. So great stuff, folks. Great stuff. I guess I'll just jump right in to the opening remarks tonight. Why not? Oh, did you see the king's coronation? He looked like a clown. There you go. Wrote that down as well. Oh, my goodness. Did you see Scott Ritter's book tour interview in St. Petersburg, Russia? It was outstanding. We're going to talk about Scott Ritter a little bit later. Ritter's review. Very good. Is the deep state turning on Joe Biden with all the recent leaks and whistleblowers? If so, who do you think would be likely to be named the Democrat candidate? All right. A lot of super chats already, and that's great. That we're going to have a lively second half of the show. Keep them rolling in. Folks, it's Sunday. Yesterday was Saturday. Usually I stream on Saturdays, but last night my wife and I went to a quinceanera. Do folks know what a quinceanera is? It's this traditional celebration in Latino culture for when a young girl, I think in Latino countries, it's when she turns 15, but in the United States, they do it with the Sweet 16 thing. It's when they turn 16. A friend of my wife had a goddaughter who was turning 16, and so we went to her celebration. And I will say, I've been to a couple of these before. Usually it's just kind of a party, right? Usually you just eat some food, some dancing, that's it. This was much more traditional. This was a much more traditional quinceanera than I have been to before. This one actually included a ceremony where they give the girl her last doll, symbolizing the end of her childhood and her entrance into womanhood. So it's her last doll. They also do this like Cinderella-like ceremony where they put high heels onto her feet because she's now old enough to wear the high heels. They had her like dancing in the middle of all these young men. It was a very elaborate show, I must say. I did not know what I was going to. Too bad it took me away from all of you. But the food was good, and it was quite an elaborate ceremony. I guess there's different ways of doing it, different traditions around the quinceanera. So that's where I was. I was at the quinceanera with my lovely wife, Matches. We had a lovely, lovely time. It was great. I took a picture of myself. They had the head of a panda. They do this thing at parties now where it's like they have this like computer thing set up for you to take pictures of yourself. I don't know what that's about, right? You can't just do that anyway with your phone. But anyway, they had that set up in the hallway. And so they had different things you could take a picture of yourself with. And so they had the head of a panda. And so when my wife and I went to take our picture, I decided to hold the head of a panda. So I was holding the head of a panda. I don't know what that was about. I assume you were supposed to put the panda head on your head and that was supposed to be funny or something, but I didn't see the humor in that. So my wife and I got our picture taken with me holding the head of a panda. And in fact, just because this is so gosh darn important, right? This is just so important, right? This is like the fate of the world depends on my telling you this. I am actually going to show you the picture of me and my wife and me holding the head of a panda at the quinceanera. Because if you don't see this, I don't know how you'll ever recover. I mean, this is like so vitally important. This is the picture. I'm going to show you the picture. You'll see the picture. You will know that we did this. It's funny, someone watching this might think I'm trying to establish an alibi, right? I'm going to all these great lengths to show you I was somewhere. Actually, I went to the quinceanera and I had my my mafia guys go and assassinate somebody. So this is my alibi. I'm just joking, of course. I'm giving you all my alibi to make sure you know where I was on Saturday night. So there's no confusion about it, right? I'm the Godfather giving you my alibi. But yes, that's me. You might recognize me from my face and my goatee and my tie. That is my wife. Her face is covered up by the very important mask. And that is the head of a panda. I do not know why the head of a panda was there at the quinceanera for you to take pictures with. However, that was just the way things are. And so when we got our picture taken, I made sure to hold the head of a panda. So that's my vitally important world news. Me and my wife and the head of a panda at the quinceanera in Brooklyn. It was a lovely Brooklyn quinceanera. Great security, mind you. Wow, they had amazing security at this event. It was just utterly amazing security. I don't know what they were expecting, but these armed guards, they patted me down for firearms on the way in. And, they were making sure that this was a safe quinceanera. Right. So I don't know what's going on. Maybe the family, well, I'm making jokes here. I'm not going to say anything anyway. But yeah, it was a very, very safe quinceanera. And thank you, Viking Dave, for the super sticker. I really do appreciate it. So there you go. My wife and I went there. A couple other things to update you on since we're just talking, right? I did want to make a point of highlighting the arrest of Gonzalo Lira, which is very important, right? I've never met Gonzalo Lira. I obviously don't agree with him on many issues, but the fact that he's been arrested by the Ukrainian security forces accused of spreading Russian propaganda, that's a very serious situation. He's a journalist who is there. He's in Ukraine and reporting on the war in a much more honest way than mainstream media. And he appears to have been arrested by the Ukrainian security services. So this is a situation we should all be paying close attention to. That could get we don't know what could happen. I mean, this is a war-torn country. If you get arrested as allegedly an enemy agent during a war-torn country, it can get really ugly really fast. So let's see if Gonzalo Lira gets released. Let's see what's going on with that. And that accompanies, what I've been talking about on here about the crackdown, the Uhuru movement, the Black Revolutionary Organization. 4 of their leaders have been indicted, are charged here in the United States with spreading Russian propaganda. Unbelievable. Accompanies what's been done to Julian Assange, so many other people. I mean, this is an ongoing trend. So I wanted folks to be aware of that situation, which is very important. Another thing, I got a couple clips because some people seem to think that what we do on here doesn't matter, right? That's the talking point of some people. Oh, what Caleb and CPI do, that doesn't matter. Nobody cares. Well, Scott Ritter right now is in Russia. He's in Russia, of all countries. He's on a book tour in Russia. And in Russia, Scott Ritter decided to do an episode of Ask the Inspector with Jeff, his co-host. And this is one of the questions he got asked. And I love his answer here. And he used it as an opportunity to go into something else. So here we go.
Questions, so we can start lining those up. That would be great. Dave from Ontario. Caleb Maupin is a well-read guy who knows how to sell his gospel, which makes sense, by the way. Most of his followers, though, look like members of the Heralds of the...
Boo! Don't insult my followers.
Red Dawn from the Jeeves and Wooster episode, Comrade Bingo.
Boo! Boo! What is Jeeves and Wooster? I don't even know what that is.
What do you think of their political potential? By the way, I'm not at all familiar with the reference, but
neither am I. What the hell is Jeeves and Wooster? Is that like, I don't know. I mean, what is that? Is that like Calvin and Hobbes in Britain, or I don't even know what that is. I don't even know what is Jeeves and Wooster. I mean, Worcester was a town near where I grew up. There was Worcester, Ohio, and then there's Worcester, Massachusetts. But Worcester, Massachusetts is spelled like Worcester, but in Ohio it's actually Wooster, right? That's how it's spelled. Yeah, I mean, there's a College of Worcester. Like, I don't even know what this is. Jeeves is a butler, right? And there was this awful search engine for a while called Ask Jeeves. Do folks know about Ask Jeeves? It was a search engine for a while. It was one of those early search engines before you had, Google, before Google had absolute dominance. You had Excite. Do you remember Excite? And you still have Bing. That's another search engine. And then on top of that, you had Ask Jeeves. So maybe it's Jeeves and Wooster. But anyway, I don't know who Dave in Ontario is, but that's what he asked. But this is Scott's response, which I appreciated.
Pretty sure that's not a compliment.
No, I'm pretty sure. If we're going to believe in democratic potential, meaning that we got to get enough citizens active, involved, engaged to make a difference, to have a potential of swaying an election about issues like disarmament and arms control, you do so one vote at a time. I don't think there's any politician out there that doesn't understand the importance of that. And especially when we're trying to be a big tent movement, meaning that we want everybody, because nuclear weapons is the great uniter. And what I mean by that is we're all going to die. I don't care if you're a character from that program you decided, or you look like Tucker Carlson back when he wore a bow tie, or it doesn't matter. You're all going to die. So I need everybody who, I almost knocked over a soda there, everybody who potentially, who is a potential victim, to come together. So I think Caleb's awesome, because Caleb taps into a particular dynamic, a particular constituency.
Well, thank you, Scott. I appreciate that. Much appreciated.
And that constituency isn't insignificant. It shouldn't be minimized or denigrated. They're fellow citizens, fellow human beings whose lives are as important as everybody's life. And I think it's awesome that Caleb can speak in a way that motivates these people. And if Caleb can bring these people into the tent to help us with our mission, I'm all for it. I'm not going to mock anybody. I mean, because look at me. People can just mock me all they want, and some do. But it doesn't mean that my vote is any less significant as anybody else's vote. One vote at a time.
There's an old saying, politics makes for strange bedfellows. And that's a good
Great segue.
name for our new podcast, by the way. How's that for a segue? Sometimes my segues are terrible. What's that?
The people who stole my time slot.
Yeah, right. This Friday night in our usual Ask the Inspector time slot, Scott is worried that he's going to lose it to these people. But the sentiment that Scott was just expressing is really the inspiration behind this concept, Strange Bedfellows. So I hope you guys will check this out. Friday night, our usual time slot, 8 p.m. Eastern time. While Scott is in Russia, they'll be in that time slot. And when he comes back, even though he was worried about losing it, that's not true at all. He will get his time slot back, and we'll find another time slot for them. So hopefully you'll check that out.
Yeah. So that was great. It was great to get a shout out from Scott Ritter. We love Scott Ritter, former UN weapons inspector who's been exposing U.S. foreign policy and the dangerous escalation with Russia, outspoken critic of the war in Iraq. Scott Ritter is awesome. And how did our relationship begin? How did the CPI's relationship begin with Scott Ritter? It began when I heard that he was not going to be able to speak at the Rage Against the War Machine. And we had the idea, we had some money, that we would have a reception after the Rage Against the War Machine, and we would invite Scott Ritter. And we didn't know if he would come. It was a whim, right? We just thought, okay, well, he can't speak at the actual rally. So why don't we invite Scott Ritter? Why don't we invite him? And he said, yes, he's coming. And I thought, well, maybe he won't show up. Maybe he will. And Scott Ritter showed up, and he said he wasn't sure if he wanted to speak or not. When he showed up, he said, I'm ready to give a speech. And so this is what happened when Scott Ritter came up to the podium. It was an epic moment. I will never forget this.
This is a hero. This is a hero right here. We love you, Scott. We love you. Go ahead and give us some words. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. To be honest, I thought I was just coming here to a reception to say hi to people, and speaking is hopefully it's a bonus. Listening. First of all, thank you.
That was the beginning of a great relationship. And our hope is that we'll be having an event with Scott when he's back in the country. We've already had him speak at our Summit Against Hypocrisy that we just had. It was a great event that we just had in Washington, D.C. Speaking of that, there will be coming out on Saturday on the Center for Political Innovation YouTube channel. There will be a documentary about the Summit Against Hypocrisy. The great Peter Coffin has put together a really well-edited, beautiful documentary describing and showing in detail what CPI is all about, and interviews and just kind of showing the behind the scenes of our Summit Against Hypocrisy. So that'll be on Saturday that documentary will be released. So go and subscribe to the CPI YouTube channel. That'll be out on Saturday, and that's going to be pretty awesome as well. That's going to be a great documentary. I just saw the final cut. Peter Coffin is really good at what he does, and everybody's in it. Everybody's in this documentary. I mean, Lumpia Logic is in the documentary. Tyler's in the documentary. Simon's in the documentary. Peter Coffin's in the documentary. Oh my goodness. So many people are in the documentary. I mean, oh wow. I mean, Elizabeth Young, our president, is in the documentary. Oh my goodness. Timoshenko is in the documentary. And oh man. Timoshenko is in the documentary, and oh wow! I mean, it's really a great film. It's almost an hour long. It's behind the scenes of our conference. You really get a feel for kind of the glow that you feel when you do group activities, you're with a group of people who believe in what they're doing. You really get a glowing feeling of, friendship and comradeship and working together for a cause you believe in. It's a really powerful film. And so you're going to like it when it comes out. You're going to love it. And that'll be premiering on Saturday. We'll have a premiere set soon. And we're going to be doing our best to promote it. We're going to tweet it out. We're also going to, send a mass email. And, it's an important documentary. It's a really well-made film that Peter made. Peter is a very skilled filmographer, filmmaker, cinematographer. He's really good at what he does. So there's that. Wanted to mention that. Now, that is not the only, far from the only mention of the CPI by important people that happened this week. This also happened. This is not the only thing that happened. There was yet another mention of CPI by notable people. And this someone sent to me. Again, this is another, didn't see it coming, but it happened. This is yet another person taking note of CPI's activities. This was at the Julian Assange protest. I wasn't there. I don't think we had any representatives of our organization even there at the rally, but Nick Brana was there at the Julian Assange rally. And he was there, Nick Brana, and here's what he said.
Looking for People's Party, and also organizer of Race and Performance Team. Nick.
All right, thank you, Suzanne.
That's Nick Brana, the head of the People's Party.
And I don't know who was here for the last event right here, but I hope it's exciting, but not that exciting. It's good to see everybody here. Thank you so much to everybody who organized this. Just a few days ago, all the biggest journalists in the country gathered at a swanky hotel right here in this city to celebrate press freedoms and liberties in this country with Joe Biden, and to celebrate the very man who has put Julian Assange, locked him away for a decade in the Ecuadorian embassy, years afterwards in Belmarsh, maximum security prison. Not one mention of his name. Not one mention of the hypocrisy of having that celebration to honor the man who has the symbol of press freedom of our time in prison, in a maximum security prison, where he can't see his family, almost never, and is essentially in conditions that the UN has described as torture. And maybe a few weeks before that, the same regime that has imprisoned that man held a democracy summit. A democracy summit, and I spoke at a CPI event right here in Washington, D.C. that was a rebuttal summit against hypocrisy to that.
That's us.
That event. And when I did that, in reading about the Democracy Summit, which is, of course, a U.S. attempt to extend its imperial hegemony, continue it around the world, impose it on the rest of the world, continue to do so. One of the pillars of that the U.S. was chiding the supposed authoritarian rest of the world for, by which it means Russia and China, which it's already in a war with Russia, a world war that it started in Ukraine. And it's looking to now start a war with China because that isn't enough. And one of the pillars of that event was protecting journalism. Another pillar, ironically, was ending corruption, tackling corruption. I can't think of a less qualified country to speak of that than the United States.
Hypocrisy Summit is what it was.
It was really the Hypocrisy Summit. That's right. And that was the name of the rebuttal event. So it's great to be here with all of you.
Yeah, that's Nick Brana. So in 1 week, last week, we got a shout out from Scott Ritter and we got a shout out from Nick Brana. And I spoke on a panel of the Platypus Affiliated Society, and I spoke on a panel of the Rage Against the War Machine people with the Schiller Institute and the Libertarian Party. And yeah, we are a very important organization. No question about it. The Center for Political Innovation, CPI, the fact that we have big conferences in Washington, D.C., the fact that we put out this book, which continues to get good reviews. We're up to 10 reviews now on Amazon. I've been on Kim Iverson's show to talk about this book. Kim Iverson did a whole long segment with me about my new book. You know, we're getting stuff done. We got this great documentary with Peter Coffin coming out. The Center for Political Innovation is marching ahead. It is absolutely marching ahead. And we are marching ahead. We're getting stuff done, and it's great. So we need you. We need you to join the Center for Political Innovation. We have people joining every week. We have new memberships coming in. We're over 80 members at this point. We'd like you to become a member, a dues-paying member today, so that you can be in on our great activities. We are having a weekend retreat June 23rd and 25th in the state of Missouri. Members are invited to it. And so we'd love to have you. If you're a member, you're welcome to come to it. We are putting in the reservation on the cabin where we're having it. It's a weekend retreat for socialist education that we're having at the end of June. It's going to be very exciting. And then it looks like we're headed to Portland after that, hopefully with Scott Ritter, with some other big names out on the West Coast. We got stuff to do. You know, we got to build a movement against the low wage police state. We've got to build a movement against the danger of a new world war. That is what we've got to do. One of our focuses is on peace on the Korean Peninsula. That is one of the things that we are focusing on. Those of you who may not have seen, we went outside the White House with our beautiful, beautiful banner. I guess I'll pull that up as right now as well, right? We'll pull up our beautiful banner that we held outside the White House. Hold on. I'll put that on the screen. We were at the White House during our summit against hypocrisy. Finish what Trump started. Peaceful reunification of the Korean Peninsula. Trump shaking hands with Kim Jong-un, a historic moment. It's time to join the Center for Political Innovation. It is time to join the Center for Political Innovation. We need members. We are organizing, and we are trying our best to build a community of resistance. Build a community of resistance. That is what we need. A community of resistance. And I thought, what the heck? You know, I might want to actually just show this video on here. Because when we talk about a community of resistance, I think a lot of people don't even know what it means to be a member of an organization anymore, right? Especially since the pandemic, we're all so chronically online. We're all looking at our phones. And I think many of us have kind of lost the notion of what it means to be part of a community of resistance. So on these streams, I shared a while back a bit of wisdom, of the wisdom that was passed on to me from Sam Marcy, the founder of the Workers' World Party. And then my friend Robert edited it together into a video. So I think I'm going to show this about using the anti-war puppet makers from the 1960s anti-war movement as an example of what a community of resistance is like and what it means to be part of a community of resistance. So I thought I might show this clip. Sam Marcy, the founder of the Workers' World Party. I never met him. He died in 1998 when I was like 11 years old. I never met him, but because I was in the Workers' World Party for 8 years, from the time I was 19 to the time I was about 27, I feel like I absorbed maybe secondhand or thirdhand, a lot of Sam Marcy's teachings. One story, or not even really a story, but quotation or anecdote that Sam Marcy, the founder of the Workers' World Party, would tell his followers about and used in many, many different speeches and lectures, was repeated to me on many, many occasions. So that Sam Marcy would talk about at the big anti-war protests. Back in the 1960s, there would be these big protests against the Vietnam War. Hundreds of thousands of people would march against the Vietnam War. All the communist groups would bring out their people. There would be, marching bands and all kinds of things. And there was one group of people that were at every big anti-war protest. Every big anti-war protest, you would see these puppets. These big puppets that people would make. And they were very big and elaborate. And they'd be puppets of Richard Nixon, the greedy capitalists sending people to war. They'd be puppets of Lyndon Johnson. They'd be, puppets of the heroic Vietnamese people fighting for their liberation from imperialism. They'd be, they did these kind of well-made giant art projects, I guess you could call them. And it would take a lot of people to operate these puppets. These puppets were not small endeavors. But these people that were against the Vietnam War, for whatever reason, they would get together and they would decide what puppets they were going to make. And they would, as a group, make these puppets, as a group, come to the anti-war protest with these very elaborate puppets that they made and march through the streets with their puppets. And that's what they did. And these people, again, they were not in any communist organization. They were not putting out a specific interpretation of leftist ideology. They were against the Vietnam War for whatever reason. They were particularly artistic, creative people. They wanted to make a contribution. They wanted to make a contribution of some kind. And because they wanted to make a contribution, and because of the fact that that they were artistically inclined, they would make these puppets. And it was like a little community that existed, and there were different puppets. There were different communities of people that would do this. And there were people that, they fell in love and got married to people who they made puppets with. There were people that they were single at the time that they started making puppets, and 3 or 4 years later, they were making puppets with their little infant baby that they had just had. And it was just this whole subculture of people that had made it their commitment in opposition to the Vietnam War. They were going to make these puppets that would be displayed at anti-war protests. That was it. And from what I heard, again, the way this story was told back to me, Sam Marcy, the founder of the Workers' World Party, would always talk about these puppet-making people. And he would talk about how valuable that was. That these people who were not communists, they were movement people, right? They were part of the movement, and they built a community, and they had found a task that they could take on to advance the struggle for justice, to make the puppets for the anti-war protests. It was a form of artistic expression. It was a form of community. And they came together and they made these puppets, and they were friends with each other, and they had relationships. And I'm sure there were arguments about these puppets. There were rivalries, or one puppet group was against another puppet group. These things happened. But they found a task. They took on a task. They made a community around it. And that was valuable. And in a way, every one of these puppet-making people is 1,000 times more valuable than some teenage kid who thinks he's Lenin, than some, know-it-all, Marxist guy who thinks he's the next Lenin, thinks he's the great leader. He knows and he understands all the Marxism, and he can out debate you and all of that, because those guys who think they understand Marxism and no one can teach them anything, they know it all and all of that, they're gone after a year or two. After a year or two, they get bored. They find a new hobby. They realize they're not going to, fulfill their dictator fantasy and become the next great leader of the revolution. And they move on. However, those puppet people, they're still there. They're still there, those puppet-making people, because for them, it's not a fantasy. It's not an intellectual exercise. It's not a word game. It's about the fact that they, one, believe in stopping the war. Two, they have found a way to do something, to make their actual contribution to stopping the war. And number three, they've built real relationships and friendships around making that contribution. They have people that they can rely on, that they can trust, that they like to work with. And because of that, they continue to make the puppets. And that is very, very valuable. And so when people talk about a movement, that's a movement. That's a movement. A movement is a group of people working together to achieve something because they believe in something. That is a movement. Now, I don't particularly, I mean, if you look at what people do now, this commodified identity where you're really by yourself, you're showing off on social media that you went to the protest, you're consuming, basically, you're consuming certain social media content, you're consuming certain books, you're making statuses, but you're not really connecting with anybody. You're not really building something. You might go to the protest and break shit every so often, but you're not really building anything. That's not a movement. The building blocks of what they called the movement was communities. And the communist groups were a big part of that, no doubt. I mean, the Workers' World Party, the Communist Party, the Socialist Workers' Party, the Revolutionary Union, the October League, these groups were a big part of it. Yes, they were a big part of it, but it was the communities and the networks of people who trusted each other, who knew each other, who relied on each other. That was what made the movement. So yeah, there you go. And that's what we're doing with the Center for Political Innovation. We are very much building a community of resistance, a community of solidarity and resistance to U.S. capitalism and imperialism. And we're not a party. We're not a pre-party formation. We hope that someday a real party does come into existence, and we definitely would have something to do with it. But we're there to get the job done, to teach people, to build connections, to build community, to publish books, to have events. We're there to get stuff done, and we're doing it. And if you want to do it with us, you are welcome. You are welcome to do it with us. You can join the Center for Political Innovation. It's quite an easy thing to do. It's just $10 a month, which is not pretty expensive in terms of dues. That is what we're striving to do. And there's a lot of questions people have, and there's a lot of things that are changing in the world. But yeah, just wanted to share that with people as well. But tonight, look, what happened at not the Pentagon, what happened at the Kremlin? I don't know if people saw. I hope you saw that there was a drone attack on the Kremlin. It appears that the Ukrainians, even though they deny having done it, flew a drone to the Kremlin, trying to murder Russian President Vladimir Putin. Now, that's a huge escalation of the war in Ukraine. And it's very frightening. And we could be having World War III at some point. The stakes are getting higher, and the need for people to take history into their own hands, to intervene in the historical processes, to try and make the world a better place and take risks. The need for that is rising. And that so much of what we are trying to do is we're trying to get people to be conscious and think about things, that people tend to kind of be asleep. They go through the world somewhat asleep. They're kind of going through the motions. And we want people to awaken, become aware of what's happening in the world, take responsibility for their communities, for their country, and for the world, and stop the marching ahead of the low-wage police state and stop the danger of a new world war. And that's what we're trying to do. That's what we're very much trying to do with the Center for Political Innovation. And in order to really do it, we have to break with a lot of the outdated understanding that's there. There's a lot we've learned since the 20th century concluded. And the global communist movement has changed a lot since the 20th century. You go to Latin America, in Nicaragua, it's Christianity, socialism, and solidarity. You go to Venezuela, their socialism is very Christian and very religious. You go to China, they have a mixed economy, a market economy, a lot of private businesses, but an overall state central plan to make sure living standards continue to go up. The global communist movement has learned a lot from the 20th century. And the main thing that happened is that the so-called left detached from the global communist movement. The synthetic left that was forged during the Cold War with CIA programs like the Congress for Cultural Freedom and Project MKUltra. When we talk about the synthetic left, we're talking about a process through which left-wing politics was completely reinvented. And I guess you could say that it's also been reinvented in the anti-imperialist countries and in the communist countries as well. The politics has been invented. Let's focus on how the Western left has been reinvented. Because at this point, I divide the synthetic left into three stages. Right? Communism, Marxism has historically been the movement of the proletariat, the working class, to seize control of the means of production, the banks, factories, and industries, and organize the economy for public good and not the profits of a wealthy few, to carry on production without the irrationality of the market so that wealth increases and the population overall becomes wealthier, that you don't have poverty amid plenty, you don't have poverty created by abundance. We often talk about the coal miner's riddle. The story goes, the coal miner, his son says to him, "Father, why is it so cold?" The father says, "Because we can't afford any coal to heat the stove." The boy says, "Why can't we afford any coal to heat the stove?" The father says, "Because I lost my job at the coal mine. I was laid off." And the boy says to the father, "Why were you laid off from your job at the coal mine?" The father says, "Because there is too much coal." That's capitalism. Poverty created by abundance. The problem of overproduction, compounded by the problem of the tendency of the falling rate of profit, that the more efficient production becomes, the easier it is to churn out goods, the more poverty that exists. An irrational system where the government buys thousands and thousands of pounds of cheese every day from farmers only to bury it in a cave in Missouri. And why do they do it? Why do they do it? Because if they didn't do that, the price of dairy products would sink so low, all the farms would go under. This is an irrational system. The capitalist system is irrational. And the socialist movement historically has been a movement of society overall, led by the working class, the wage workers, to seize control of the banks, factories, and industries so they can be operated for the benefit of all society, not simply a wealthy few who own them. It is the struggle of the working class and society as a whole to take control of the means of production so that growth can no longer be restrained, so that human innovation and human creativity can soar to astronomically new heights, no longer restrained by the irrationality of the market. Human reason and central planning can be put in control of the means of production. That's the communist movement, historically. And the communist movement first seized power in Russia, the Bolshevik Revolution in 1917, and under Stalin's leadership, Russia soared. It became the huge industrial superpower. Huge, power plants were created, huge steel mills, illiteracy was wiped out, millions of people were lifted from poverty. It became an industrial powerhouse. The Nazis invaded, they defeated the Nazis, and after they defeated the Nazis, pretty soon they were launching Sputnik, and they were inventing space travel. They patented the first cellular phone. This very, very backward, impoverished country with socialist central planning was able to lift itself up. After the Second World War, you had the Cold War. And it was during the Cold War that the American intelligence agencies, the CIA, was disturbed by the fact that so many scientists, so many intellectuals, so many writers, so many great thinkers and musicians and composers supported the Soviet Union, supported communism. You had at the Waldorf Hotel in 1949, a huge conference, the Waldorf Peace Conference. Albert Einstein was there. Aaron Copland, the musician, he was there. The composer was there. Shostakovich, the great Soviet composer, he was there. You had Robert Oppenheimer, one of the main creators of the atomic bomb, the scientist, he was there. Many brilliant intellectuals, Lillian Hellman, Will Geer, many actors, many people at the height of McCarthyism went to this pro-Soviet conference to basically say the Soviet Union was right and the U.S. was wrong in the Cold War. Paul Robeson was there. It was a big moment. And people looked on and they said, how is this possible? And so from there, the CIA began what they called the Congress for Cultural Freedom program, which was when they started funneling money to left-wing writers and intellectuals, artists, musicians, others, who were anti-communist. And they started a magazine called Partisan Review Magazine, funded by the CIA. And it was a new socialist magazine funded by the American government, sent to all the college campuses in America. Everybody was reading Partisan Review. And it was to try and create a new kind of socialism, leftism, Marxism. And it was all paid for by the American government. In Britain, they set up a magazine called Encounter. Same thing. In Germany, they started a magazine called Der Monat. In France, they started the Paris Review. And no one knew that this was American government propaganda. People thought this was just leftist viewpoints. But it was claiming to speak in the name of socialism, peace activism, civil rights, but it was paid for by the American government. You can Google this. This is now a well-documented historical fact, the Congress for Cultural Freedom program. And they put forward a number of different intellectuals to be the voice of their new movement, most of whom were Trotskyites. Most of them were people who had worked with Leon Trotsky and had a falling out with Leon Trotsky, had been aligned with Max Shachtman and the Shachtmanites. They were neo-Trotskyites, broken with Trotsky over the question of the Soviet Union, of defense of the USSR. But their politics started taking an interesting turn. Hannah Arendt is one of the writers who was promoted by the CIA in the Congress for Cultural Freedom program. And Hannah Arendt, she wrote a very famous book called Eichmann in Jerusalem. And it was all about how Adolf Eichmann, this Nazi war criminal who'd been extradited, the Israelis had kidnapped him from Argentina. They took him to Israel and they hung him, about how he was just an ordinary man. Just an ordinary man, Adolf Eichmann, this Nazi war criminal. And the message of her book, Eichmann in Jerusalem, a study in the banality of evil, her message was that deep down, ordinary people are evil. Deep down, ordinary people are Nazis. And that you need sophisticated intellectuals to control the ordinary people, because if you don't, they're Nazis. And Hannah Arendt very famously equated Nazi Germany with the Soviet Union. And she said they were the same system, essentially. They were the same system. They were totalitarianism. Then you had Susan Sontag. And her argument, she went as far as saying communism is nothing but the most successful form of fascism. And communism is a variant of fascism. It's just fascism with a human face. You had Irving Howe, who went on to start something called the Democratic Socialists of America, Bernie Sanders' group. And Irving Howe said that if you're a socialist, you have to be a partisan of the West in the Cold War. You have to be on the side of the United States against the Soviet Union, against China. You have to be a partisan of the West in the Cold War. At the same time that the CIA was funding this new left, and they started calling it the new left, and all of a sudden these people were on TV saying that they were the left, right? They wouldn't allow genuine communists to go on TV, but all of a sudden these people would be on television, they'd be on the radio, they were the voice of the left, these people. At the same time, the CIA launched Project MK Ultra. They had the Congress for Cultural Freedom. Then they had MK Ultra. And what was Project MK Ultra? It was a program distributing hallucinogenic drugs to the public. Again, documented fact. Go read Search for the Manchurian Candidate. Go read The Poisoner in Chief. This is all public. They were distributing LSD all over the country. They were going to college campuses and paying college students to take LSD to see what the effects were. They had Operation Midnight Climax, where they walked around San Francisco and had undercover CIA agents just hand out LSD to random people on the street, drop it in people's drinks to see if that could have some military value. Getting people stoned out of their minds. They had open air concerts, rock concerts, where they would just hand out LSD to people. There'd be a free concert by the Rolling Stones or the Beatles or the whoever, and there would be drugs being handed out for free, getting all kinds of young people on LSD. And Dr. Timothy Leary, a college professor from Harvard, was involved in these experiments. He ended up getting fired from Harvard, and then he started touring the country as the high priest of LSD, going around the country urging young people to use LSD, to use drugs, to use hallucinogens. Tune in, turn on, drop out. All of this, we now know the reinvention of left-wing politics to be anti-populist, to see the people as the enemy, to promote things that communists have always opposed. Communists have been the biggest opponents of drug use. It used to be communists didn't even drink. John Reed, one of the founders of the Communist Party, he did not drink alcohol. Eugene Debs and many of the early American socialists and communists were against drinking alcohol. Marijuana, LSD, forget it. Socialists always were advocates of temperance. They argued that alcoholism and drug addiction, all of this was a tool of the capitalists to control people. It destroys people. It's a symptom of an evil system that people have to numb their pain with this kind of suffering. They saw what horrendous things. A lot of feminists were advocates of opposing alcohol because they associated alcohol with domestic violence. Right? I believe it was Carrie Nation, was a very famous feminist in American history who was also a big prohibitionist and was urging people not to drink alcohol. And there was a whole widespread movement for socialism in the United States, the Socialist Party, the Communist Party. And if you read what William Z. Foster wrote and others, they were not advocates of drug use. They were not advocates of dope. They were not advocates of people becoming intoxicated. And in fact, in China, after the revolution, one of the first things they did was they executed the opium importers, and they stamped out the drug trade. The Black Panthers used to go assassinate heroin dealers because they saw heroin as a plot by the white man to kill the black community, and they would assassinate heroin dealers. So suddenly, though, leftism became associated with using drugs. And in the 1960s, because McCarthyism had not worked, McCarthyism was the first attempt to wipe out communist and leftist influence. Didn't completely work. The second attempt was to create a synthetic left, a place that people that had rebellious instincts, people that didn't want to follow rules, people that wanted to rebel against authority, people who might become communists might go. They went to this synthetic left. That was the first stage of what we're seeing now. The second stage came later. And it started really, the very beginnings of it were with what you called the Prague Spring in Czechoslovakia. Czechoslovakia, 1968, the United States was trying to divide Czechoslovakia from the Soviet Union. It was a Soviet-aligned government, a communist, Marxist-Leninist government, Czechoslovakia. And they knew that among some of the young intellectuals in Czechoslovakia, there was frustration. They wanted more freedom of speech. They wanted, to be able to listen to Western music. They were enamored with the Beatles and rock and roll music and such. And so the CIA began promoting a faction in the Czechoslovakian communist government led by a guy named Dubček. And Dubček said he was a communist, but he said he was against Stalinism. He said he believed in socialism with a human face. That's what he said he believed in. He said he was not an anti-communist, but he was against Stalinism, and he wanted socialism with a human face, or democratic socialism. He was against the Soviet Union. We now know the CIA was funneling loads of money, funneling loads of leaflets and propaganda, doing everything it could to prop up Dubček's wing of the Czechoslovakian communists. But it looked like it was just a difference of opinion. The Soviet Union, they have their way of doing things, their, Stalinist way of doing things. And then in Czechoslovakia, they've got their more open socialism with a human face. And Dubček and his supporters seized control of the government of Czechoslovakia. They cut off support for the National Liberation Front of Vietnam. And they seized control of the government of Czechoslovakia, and they were moving Czechoslovakia to align with the United States against the Soviet Union. In the name, not of capitalism, but of democratic socialism. And so the Soviet Union intervened militarily, and it sent troops to Czechoslovakia to retake control of the country. But what the CIA learned was that it was much more effective to stage uprisings against communist governments, not in the name of anti-communism, but in the name of socialism with a human face, democratic socialism, human rights. Now, it started with the Prague Spring, was that this synthetic left that had started as a way to kind of confuse communists and leftists in the Western countries started becoming a vehicle for staging protests and rebellions within communist countries. They realized that a lot of the young people who couldn't remember what it was like before the communists came to power, they were born after World War II. They couldn't remember what it had been like before the country had electricity, before the country had running water. They couldn't remember that. They'd grown up with a guaranteed job, with guaranteed health care. And they were frustrated with the fact that living in these communist countries, they didn't have the same freedoms that people have in other societies. They were frustrated with that. And they also really liked the rock and roll music. They liked Western American movies. The USA always had much sexier media than the Eastern Bloc communist countries did. So they liked this stuff, and those folks could be manipulated. And you started with Prague Spring, Czechoslovakia, 1968. But after that, all across the communist bloc, they started cultivating these intellectuals these dissidents, most of whom did not believe they were anti-communists, most of whom believed that they were Trotskyists, anarchists, democratic socialists, but in reality, they were being used by the American government. And all of that culminated in the overthrow of the Eastern Bloc. In 1989, country after country was overthrown. East Germany, Romania, Czechoslovakia, Poland, communist government after communist government was toppled. What would happen is these young people would go out and protest, and there would be instability in the country. They'd be blocking roads. They'd be demonstrating. And it wouldn't be clear what they were protesting about. They would just say they wanted freedom. They would just say they wanted liberty. You know, it wouldn't be clear what they wanted. And then a wing of the military would seize power and declare communism was over. It would use the chaos created by these young people, and that the CIA had also cultivated relationships. The American government had cultivated relationships with many of the reformist factions within the military and the policing agencies of the Eastern Bloc. And so they'd have all the young people go out and protest about, they didn't really know. They just wanted freedom. They're against corruption. They're for democracy. You know, wasn't clear what they wanted. And then the pro-US wing of the military would seize power and declare communism over. And this was the color revolutions. And it was the synthetic left. That was stage 2 of the synthetic left. Synthetic left started out in Western countries, but then it became useful in destabilizing communist governments. And many of these younger people were convinced, everybody pretty much, at the time that these counter-revolutions happened. Ultimately, you had the fall of the Soviet Union, 1991. These people were convinced, well, we're gonna become a social democratic country. We're gonna become Norway. We're gonna become Sweden. We're gonna become Finland. You know, we're gonna have guaranteed jobs. We're gonna have guaranteed health care, but we won't have sanctions. We'll be able to listen to Beatles music. We'll be able to watch MTV. They didn't understand what they were getting, because in all of these countries, what they got was economic demolition. The countries were destroyed economically. The life expectancy would drop. Mass unemployment would follow. All the state industries that these countries had built up would be sold off to the highest bidder. And in the 1990s, you want to read about it, go read Europe Since 1989 by Philip Thayer. This book describes how country after country, Ukraine, Moldova, Czechoslovakia, Poland, was just economically devastated. Jeffrey Sachs and the International Monetary Fund would go to these countries and loot them economically. These countries were looted. Russia was looted. The Yeltsin years in Russia were a nightmare. Go and read Naomi Klein and her great book on this, The Shock Doctrine, The Rise of Disaster Capitalism. When these countries toppled their Marxist-Leninist government, in the name of democratic socialism, in the name of human rights, socialism with a human face, when the synthetic left came to power in these countries, they handed it over to Wall Street. And under Bill Clinton's leadership, the Yeltsin administration in Russia, the various Marxist governments, they wrecked these countries economically. And these people, and you can read many times people saying things like, we didn't know what we had. And in fact, polls show in every former Soviet country, every single former Eastern Bloc country, Romania, Czechoslovakia, Poland, Estonia, Moldova, even Ukraine, country after country, Yugoslavia, people say life was better before the fall of the Soviet Union. In fact, Soviet nostalgia is very widespread. People say we didn't know what we had. We didn't know what we had. We had guaranteed jobs. We had guaranteed health care, guaranteed education. We didn't have narco drug gangs. We didn't have human trafficking. We didn't have, organized crime. We could walk the streets safe at night. They didn't know what they had. And they'd been lied to. And it wouldn't have worked if they had done it in the name of anti-communism. If they'd attacked these people and said, oh, we're for capitalism, these people would have rallied to the defense of their countries. It was done. It was successful because it was done with the intellectuals, and it was done in the name of the synthetic left. It was done in the name of sexual freedom. It was done in the name of rock and roll music. It was done in the name of freedom of mind and democratic socialism and all of this. The synthetic left, that was stage 2 of it, was creating this apparatus of well-funded protest entities. George Soros was a Hungarian billionaire, not from the United States, but he would funnel the money to these countries, and he would manipulate the currencies, and that's how he made billions and billions of dollars. And this, and I'll never forget when I was in high school, my parents, wanted me to go away for the summer or whatever. So I went to a program to study peace studies, right? My parents are like, hey, you're activist-y or whatever, why don't you go study peace studies? So I went to this Quaker peace studies program, and it was part of this. And I remember, I didn't know at the time, but they showed us a movie called Bringing Down a Dictator, all about how they built this peaceful movement to overthrow Milosevic, Otpor. We talked about the Eastern Bloc and the negotiations that brought down the Soviet Union and how you can win without war. And it was all about how, the Pentagon and the war hawks, they're no good. But, what we need is we need people's consciousness awakening, speaking truth to power. And this peace studies program. And I remember I was a high school student, and I sat through all the trainings, and we did all these workshops about all of this. And we learned all about the color revolution apparatus, the people who protest in Venezuela nowadays, the people who protest in Nicaragua. It is a global network that they've created of NGOs and nonprofits. The Peace Corps is heavily involved with it, and it is a very sinister, and it looks very revolutionary and left-wing on the surface. They use the fist. They talk about human rights and workers' rights and women's empowerment, and it's this whole apparatus they created in the late Cold War in the 1970s and 80s, and really escalating in the 90s. And they can use it to bring down governments. And it was these entities that set the stage for the Syrian civil war, destabilized Syria and reduced Syria to civil war. It's these entities that destabilized Libya, the most prosperous country on the African continent. Libya had the highest life expectancy. It was a very prosperous country under the leadership of Gaddafi. Now Libya is devastated. Since the revolution won in Libya, the country has been destroyed. The color revolution apparatus, that was the second stage of the synthetic left. This woke, activist-y, human rights, anti-racist, women's empowerment, LGBT, sexual freedom, democracy movement that they set up, that they've then used to bring down any government that gets in the way of what Wall Street wants. And they use the college professors and academics. They're a big part of it. I remember when I was in college, a couple of the professors were just amazing shills for all of this. They would just, it was like whatever country the memo went out, we're supposed to hate this week. They'd be lighting candles for the monks of Myanmar. They'd be protesting to save Darfur. They'd be out there cheering for the Dalai Lama, whatever the cause of the week was, whatever, hating Russia and China and hating whatever government aligned with them we were supposed to be trying to overthrow. And that's what a lot of these academics are involved. That's what they do, right? They're tied in with this network, this pro-imperialist color revolution network that's been set up. And that when it's time to topple some government, that's what they do. And that was phase 2. But we're now living under stage 3 of the synthetic left. Stage 3 of the synthetic left is the color revolution apparatus coming home. starting with the presidency of Barack Obama. In the aftermath of the U.S. financial crisis, remember the U.S. economy crashed and Barack Obama came in on a white horse to save us all. And suddenly the liberals had this upper hand with this new thing called Facebook and then this new thing called Twitter. And all of a sudden, the color revolution came home. The color revolution apparatus came home. All these liberal foundations and NGOs, all of the use of social media to destabilize countries with protests, it all started happening here in the United States. As U.S. society becomes less and less stable, the ultra monopolies aligned with Silicon Valley, aligned with the big four super major oil companies, the Rockefellers, the Carnegies, the DuPonts, the Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg, that faction, the ultra rich, the ultra monopolies that are tied in with the government, that are liberals, that are Democrats, they have come home to set up a low-wage police state. And the way they're doing it is with these mind control, emotional manipulation methods that were first learned with the synthetic left in the 60s and the counterculture, then learned in the Cold War overthrowing various Marxist governments. And now with social media, they're amped up like you wouldn't believe. And they've ultimately found a method for controlling the United States. And they are very open about what they want. What do they want? They want to reduce the population. There's too many people. Number two, what do they want? They want to reduce consumption. They want all the people who do exist to have less, to have lower incomes, to buy fewer products, to live in worse conditions, to consume less. They want to reduce the amount of fossil fuels we use, the amount of electricity we use. They want to reduce the number of people overall, and they want to reduce the living standards of those people, of the people who do exist. What else do they want? They want a full-on mobilization for World War III. They want to tear down Russia. They want regime change in Russia. They talk about decolonizing Russia, even though Russia has never colonized anyone. They want to break Russia up into a bunch of pieces. They want to break China up into a bunch of pieces. They want to tear down all the socialist governments of South and Central America. They want to tear down the Islamic Republic of Iran. They want to tear down the Syrian Arab Republic. They know what they're doing. The color revolution apparatus has now come home to the United States. And the target is the United States, which they can lock down into a low-wage police state. And they can use social media to manipulate people, and confuse people. And when it really gets down to it, they have one psychological trick. They have one psychological trick to carry out their operation. Libidinal release. They give you permission to unleash your impulses. We all have anger. We all have rage. We've all been mistreated in our lives, some of us more than others. We've all suffered unfairly. The way they gain their power is they go to people and they say, you have permission to be angry. They give you permission to unleash your rage. Number two, we all have a sex drive, don't we? I certainly do. We all have a sex drive. And they give you permission to unleash your sex drive. Unleash your sex drive. Unleash your rage. All the restraint that you've held in, let it out. by giving you permission to be angry, giving you permission to be sexual. Libidinal release is a way of winning your loyalty. Because generally, people feel guilty. People act out of control when they're angry. If people act out of control in a sexual way, they feel guilty. They come along. What do? They say, oh, you're right to be angry. If someone tells you not to be angry, they're tone policing you. They're tone policing you. Be angry. Be angry. They say, oh, you want to be sexual? Be sexual. Don't feel any guilt about it. And that basically they have created a situation where people are letting their rage go, where people are letting their sex go, where people are fighting each other over everything, where people are more alienated from each other than ever before, where families are coming apart, communities are coming apart, where people are so much just broken down into atomized individuals on social media, where it's hard to find common points of reference even in conversations, where people are just resentful and angry and afraid and over-sexualized. And they break us all down into atomized individuals. That is what they are doing. And they're doing it so they can rule over all of us. There's an old, it's like one of the most common cliche stories, right? But, you get a bunch of sticks, right? You take a stick by itself. You say, break it. It breaks very easily. But then you get a bunch of sticks together in a bundle, and they say, now break it. And you can't. It's far easier to break an isolated individual than it is to break a solid community. And they know that. And so they are breaking us all. They're atomizing us all into isolated individuals, breaking up any community that exists, making everyone suspicious of everyone, making everyone afraid of everyone so that they can gain and maintain their power. And ultimately, what they are doing is they're trying to save capitalism. Because capitalism has this problem of poverty created by abundance, overproduction. The more wealth that's created under capitalism, the poorer people get. And we're in a long-term economic crisis because of the computer revolution, because of artificial intelligence, and so much of this. We're in a long-term economic crisis. And so they are using the synthetic left, this left that they created to fight communism. They are using that as the mechanism for trying to force their degrowth on society. But there is resistance. And the resistance is very interesting. The resistance is very interesting because it used to be there were a lot of different ideologies out there, and there still are a lot of different ideologies out there, but they were all against each other. Christians and communists couldn't stand each other. And, Muslims and socialists and Arab socialists, they couldn't stand each other. And, Russian nationalists and communists, that all these ideologies that existed, all these belief systems that people built their countries and communities around, nationalism, religion, Marxism, socialism, all of these things were at odds with each other. But now, I've seen the resistance. When I went to Iran for the first time in 2014, that was my first time in an anti-imperialist country. I went to Iran in 2014, and I went to a conference. And at that conference, I was there as a communist. I was a member of the Workers' World Party, and I was sitting at the table with Shia Muslims, who are our hosts, with Russian nationalists, people associated with Alexander Dugin and with Putin supporters. I was sitting at the table with Ba'athist Arab socialists from Syria, former supporters of Saddam Hussein, Ba'athist Arab socialists. I was sitting at the table with Bolivarians from Latin America. We were in this one hotel, people from all over the world, the New Horizon Conference of Independent Thinkers and Filmmakers, all different ideologies against their system. And I'd say everyone in the room was more or less against capitalism. I'd say everyone in the room probably was critical of the official story of 9/11. But aside from that, there were big differences. People that would call themselves right-wing, people that would call themselves left-wing, black nationalists, libertarian conservatives from the United States. I guess they wouldn't be against capitalism. But all of us were there because we were at odds with this satanic liberal order that says not only is there no God, and they push that really, really hard now. There is no God, but there's also no right and wrong. There's no truth. There's nothing worth sacrificing for, nothing to believe in. And I'm sitting in a room full of people who reject that. And they say that right and wrong do exist, truth does exist. And the instability and the chaos that is being spread by the Pentagon and by Silicon Valley and by Wall Street around the world that leaves people in poverty, that destroys countries, that's created a refugee crisis. It's the enemy. And you can see that if you're a Muslim, and you can see that if you're a Christian, and you can see that if you're a Russian nationalist, and you can see that if you're a Ba'athist Arab socialist, and you can see that if you're a Bolivarian socialist from Latin America. You can see that if you're an old school communist, Marxist, Leninist. And when I go to conferences in Russia, and I went to the Yalta Economic Forum, when I went to the World Conference of Parliamentarianism or the Anti-Globalization Conference in Moscow in 2018, that's where I met Alexander Dugin. When I go to Nicaragua, when I went to Venezuela and saw a whole radio station paid for by Iran that they set up in Venezuela, that's what I'm seeing. Illiberalism. Illiberalism is coming together. And the fight is no longer, it's not these ideologies fighting each other. It's not about, are you a communist? Are you a Christian? Are you a Muslim? Are you a nationalist? It's not about that anymore. It's, are you a believer in growth and humanity and human productivity? Are you a believer in community? Or are you a believer in this satanic evil that has come over the world, that is promoted by the West now? The United States is dominated by the synthetic left. It's dominated by this sinister, pessimistic, Malthusian ideology that says growth and economic growth is bad. Human beings are a cancer on Mother Earth. All ideologies are a scam. All ideologies are false. There is no right and wrong. That is what the Western world is dominated by. And this is what they're spreading around the world. This is what they're fighting for in Ukraine. And this is what they brought to Libya after they overthrew Gaddafi. This is what they brought to Iraq after they overthrew Saddam Hussein. It is the sinister, pessimistic, hopeless belief in human beings as animals that need to be managed and manipulated with social media. That is what they're spreading all over the world. And it's evil. It's evil. And everyone who is imbued with any sense of morality, any sense of community loyalty, can see that. In fact, a lot of Americans can see that. Whether you want to hear me say this or not, a lot of Americans voted for Donald Trump because they can see that. As bad as Trump was in a lot of ways, Trump said, I'm going to make America great again. I'm going to make you love your country again. You know, check out Trump's latest speech about the quantum leap. He's going to build freedom cities. He's going to build new cities. He's going to encourage families to have children. Donald Trump increasingly appeals to people on the basis of being opposed to this evil. There is a global movement. There is a global movement rejecting Western liberalism, rejecting capitalism in decay and the neoliberal world order, and arguing that we need a society where the banks, factories, and industries are organized to serve public good and not the profits of a few. We need an economy that's for the people. We need humans to come together and work together. We need to value people. We need to view people as an asset. Every child, when they're born, should be viewed as capable of making a great contribution. We should invest in every child that's born. We should provide them with health care and education, not as a handout, but because their productivity as a human will contribute to our society overall. We should view every human being not as a freeloader, not as a burden, but as a potential beautiful flower in our garden. That's how we should view humanity. These are the values that can bring people together across ideologies. And these are the values that define the global anti-imperialist movement led by Russia and China. Iran is a big part of it. Venezuela is a big part of it. Nicaragua is a big part of it. This is the fight that's breaking out. It is between liberal fascism, wokeism, and the synthetic left that's taken control in the West, and humanity and God. However you want to speak of God, I'm sure, there's many atheistic communists who'd say, well, it's not God, it's simply the working class. It's the working class, the neo-colonial. Okay, fine. Don't call it God if you don't want to. But there is something more powerful than the evil that is unfolding before us. There is something that connects human beings to each other, that gives us the strength to push back against all of this. There's something that I've been to communes in central Caracas. I've been to neighborhoods in Tehran and in Isfahan where people are huge supporters of the Islamic Republic, and there is spiritual power. There's spiritual power. There is spiritual power. There is something that binds people together to say we are a solid block. We will not be moved. Just like a tree that's planted by the water, we will not be moved. We are going to stand here and defend our homes and our neighborhoods and our communities with our bodies. It exists. And it is that will be victorious. And it is that force that we at the Center for Political Innovation are desperately trying to tap into. We are trying to build a community of resistance and a community of solidarity. And we would like to have you become part of it. And we are going to continue to do everything we can with these broadcasts, with our documentaries, with our films, with our relationships with great thinkers like Scott Ritter and great people like Nick Brana from the People's Party. We are going to do everything we can to advance the human race in the face of this evil and to get us beyond the crisis of Western capitalism and imperialism and decay. And that is our worldview. And it's understanding the weakness of the synthetic left that has helped me to develop this worldview. So I hope that this is helpful. I hope this was a helpful opening presentation. And so now I will call you all out as I see you, names and locations, names and locations. I will call you all out as I see you, names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Who's with us? Names and locations. Who's with us tonight? We'll do the roll call, and then I'll start answering super chats. So if you have more super chats, send them my way. All right, we got George in Sydney. Very good. Western Illinois, Gavin. Yonatan Mahari in Sweden. UT. You're in Utah. Kendall in San Diego. Western Illinois. Jane in New Zealand. David in Hamilton, Ontario. St. David's, Bermuda. Rupert in England. Christian in Bergen County. Chester in England. Edward Allen in Kentucky. Molly McGuire in Orange County. Bendigo, Australia. David Fox, good friend of the show. AJ from NJ. Tyler in Missouri, about to pass out. Well, get some rest, Tyler. We plugged your podcast earlier. We showed Scott Ritter talking about us and talking about it. So, Strange Bedfellows, go listen to it. Great stuff. Jamie in St. Paul, Minnesota. Gleb from Long Beach. Annie in California. Catalonia, Spain. Love the stream as always. Balthazar in Oakland. Stephen Morris in Riverside. Bob Troy in New York. Vancouver, Isaac Cabrera, Dover, Zephyr in Eugene, Oregon. We're going to be in Oregon soon. Neil Fraser in Hong Kong. Thank you, Tyler, for your great work. We got Neil Fraser in Hong Kong, Auckland, New Zealand, Anthony in Detroit, Alex from Brazil is with us. We got Briggy. Shout out to you, Briggy, a.k.a. Funky Lollipop. We got Sherry Weiss in Virginia. Welcome, Sherry. Welcome, welcome, welcome. We got Dopamine in Isabel in Toronto. Welcome, Isabel. We got Nick in Germany. Welcome, Nick. We got Clinton Fraser in South London. Welcome, Mr. Fraser. Very, very good. Names and locations, folks. Names and locations. I will call you all out as I see you. Names and locations. Names and locations. For some reason, Nick in Germany makes me want to sing Twilly Willy Wick Boom Boom. Da dun da dun da dun da da. Twilly Willy Wick Boom Boom. That's some German song, right? I believe it's that song. It's a Ventos in Australia. I believe that song is it's called Dr. Eisenbeard and Eisenbart, right? And it's about, like, I guess way back, before there was like formal physicians, there was some guy who would travel around Germany doing like performing surgery and stuff as a show, as like theater. And so people made a song to kind of make fun of the guy, and it was called, and they made it just kind of a children's rhyme. But it's a tune that, I've heard many, many times. Ba bum 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 ba da ba da bum 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 ba da ba da bum 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 ba dum bum bum ba dum bum bum ba dum bum 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 bum. Anyway, yeah, it's an old German melody. Da 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 da. Here, I'll put it on. I'll find a version of it. I am a sucker for a good melody, even if it's not, communist or not related to any, anything we're talking about. I love a good melody. That's just how I am. I love a good melody, and that's a melody that I heard years ago when I was a child. I must have stumbled upon it at some point, and then it just stuck with me. Yeah, and Dr. Eisenbart, it translates to Iron Beard. So I guess this is an American version of it. I'll put it on. I don't know why. That song just, someone was from Germany, and I don't know. I many times I'm reading these live streams, I hear someone's from Germany, and I start thinking of this song. So I'm going to put it on here. We'll put on Dr. Ironbeard, a German folk song. I think it's for children, but whatever. I just like the melody, right? I just like the melody I like strong melodies. It's just a thing about me. So there we go. All right, we'll put it on. Here we go.
They called him Dr. Pioneer, Twilly Willy Wink Boom Boom. He came to town but once a year, Twilly Willy Wink Boom Boom. His covered wagon moved so slow, Twilly Willy Wink Boom 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 Boom. He brought with him a medicine show, Twilly Willy Wink Boom Boom. Sing Tourier, Tourier, Twilly Willy Wink Boom 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 Boom. Sing Tourier, Tourier, Twilly Willy Wink Boom Boom. Showed us all his marvelous skill, Twilly Willy Wink Boom Boom. His secret potions cured our ills, Twilly Willy Wink Boom Boom. He could make the dumb to walk, Twilly Willy Wink Boom 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 Boom. The lame to see and the blind to talk, Twilly Willy Wink Boom Boom. Sing Tourier, Tourier, Twilly Willy Wink Boom 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 Boom. Sing Tourier, Tourier, Twilly Willy Wink Boom Boom. Twilly Willy Wink Boom Boom. Twilly Willy.
Yeah, it's just one of those old German melodies. You've probably heard it used. It's one of those melodies that gets used like over and over and over again in folk music. We'll play another version of it. Here's German. Okay. All right. Here's another version. It's just one of these old German melodies. I like it.
Ich bin der Dr. Eisenbart, Willi Willi Wink Bum Bum, kurier die Leute nach meiner Art, Willi Willi Wink Bum Bum, kann machen, dass die Blinden gehen, Willi Willi Wink Juchairasa, und dass die Lahmen wiedersehen, Willi Willi Wink Bum Bum. Laporia, Willi Willi Wink Juchairasa, Laporia, Willi Willi Wink Bum Bum. Des Küsters Sohn in Purodum, Willi Willi Wink Bum Bum, dem gab ich 10 Pfund Opium, Willi Willi Wink Bum Bum. Drauf schlief Jahre, Tag und Nacht, Willi Willi Wink Juchairasa, und ist bis jetzt nicht aufgewacht, Willi Willi Wink Bum Bum. Laporia, Willi Willi Wink Juchairasa, Laporia, Willi Willi Wink Bum Bum. Zu Prag da nahm ich einen Weib, Willi Willi Wink Bum Bum, 10 Fudersteine aus dem Leib, Willi Willi Wink Bum Bum. Der letzte war ihr Leichenschein, Willi Willi Wink Juchairasa, sie wird wohl jetzt kurieret sein, Willi Willi Wink Bum Bum. Laporia, Willi Willi Wink Juchairasa, Laporia, Willi Willi Wink Bum Bum. Mein allergrößtes Meisterstück, Willi Willi Wink Bum Bum, das macht ich einst in Osnabrück, Willi Willi Wink Bum Bum. Wo Tag ich war ein alter Knab, Willi Willi Wink Juchairasa, ich schnitt ihm beide Beine ab, Willi Willi Wink Bum Bum. Laporia, Willi Willi Wink Juchairasa, Laporia, Willi Willi Wink Bum Bum.
All right. I'm having a little too much fun with this. I know you didn't come here to listen to German music, but I'm having a little bit. I'm having a little bit of fun with this. But one more, just one more, folks, and then we'll go back to. I'll start answering super chat questions, but I'm having a little too much fun here. But that's okay. That is okay, right? All right. Oh. Hold on. All right. Okay. All right. Here we go. Okay, that must not be it. All right. Okay. Oh, here we go. All right. Here we are. Okay.
Ich bin der Dr. Eisenbart, Willi Willi Wink Bum Bum, kurier die Leute nach meiner Art, Willi Willi Wink Bum Bum, kann machen, dass die Blinden
All right. Now we never want to hear that melody ever again. We have done it to death, and it is over. I promise not to play it for the rest of tonight's stream, at least. All right. There you go. Yeah, I know what you mean. But all right. Now I'm going to start answering super chat questions. If you have a super chat question, by all means, send it my way. I will start answering it. First question is about Maximilien Robespierre. Maximilien Robespierre was a leader of the French Revolution. He was a Jacobin. He was a radical of the French Revolution. He was one of the more radical figures. He was all about replacing the churches with temples of reason, and he was all about having ultra democracy, etc. And you had the Thermidor, the 9 Thermidor, the French revolutionary calendar. They divided after the French Revolution. They thought 12 months, the lunar months, that was not scientific and rational enough. So they came up with a calendar that had 10 months in it. One of the months was called Thermidor. And the month of Thermidor, on the 9th of the Thermidor month, they arrested Robespierre and they cut his head off. Even though he'd sent many people to the guillotine, he himself got guillotined as well. He was a leader of the French Revolution. I mean, I don't know. I mean, he was part of the French revolutionary process. Revolutions tend to go through stages. Somewhere I have a book. This book is actually quite interesting. I don't necessarily agree with it, but I somewhere I have the book, The Anatomy of a Revolution. Yeah. Is it over here? There's a book called The Anatomy of a Revolution. That was quite popular. It was written in the 1930s, but it was quite popular during the 1970s. Apparently, Zbigniew Brzezinski said he was studying it trying to figure out how to manage the Islamic Revolution of Iran. I don't know where it is. I have it somewhere. Oh, here. The Anatomy of a Revolution. Here we go. The Anatomy of a Revolution. And it divides revolutions into categories. And one of them is the Thermidor, which is when the revolution takes a retreat, takes a step back. And the French Revolution is very much the model revolution, right? I mean, if you read Marx, you read Trotsky, you read Lenin, even though they considered the French Revolution to be a capitalist bourgeois revolution, overturning feudalism, it was the point of reference. Jacobinism, that's a term, the most radical, bloodthirsty faction in the French Revolution was called the Jacobins, and that there's kind of a revolutionary process. And Robespierre, when he was killed, that was a sign that France was becoming more conservative, and it eventually paved the road for the rise of Napoleon. And Napoleon, it's a French revolutionary process. He was a figure in the French Revolution. Obviously, not a nice dude, killed a lot of people, but at the same point, overthrown through the old system. These things are complicated, right? And a lot of times, people, instead of the times being made by the men, it's the men who are made by the times, right? And that people become who they are. And think about Lincoln, right? I mean, Lincoln, under different historical circumstances, could have been nobody. But because of unique historical circumstances, Lincoln became the leader of the Second American Revolution to abolish slavery. He said he didn't even want to end slavery, but he had to, right? History forced his hand. He was forced by historical circumstances to play a heroic role. Right? Who knows? Robespierre could have been a totally normal person, but look how he ended up. I will say that when I was very young, I was at the library and I got my hands on the play Marat Sade by Peter Weiss. It was a very famous play from the early 1960s. It was written by the German playwright Peter Weiss. It was translated into English. They've made a movie out of it. It is a play about the French Revolution. It's basically a bunch of inmates in a mental hospital after the French Revolution. They perform a play asking the question, was the French Revolution really worth it or not? And I at a very young age, I read Marat Sade, the script, of this play. I came across it at the public library and I read it, and it was very exciting to me because it spoke to me on many, many levels. It was about the question of, is revolution really worth it? Are human beings evil? I mean, it was a really powerful piece of writing. So there you go. The French Revolution certainly set the stage. And it's related to a lot of the things we talk about on here. Did you see the king's coronation? He looked like a clown. I didn't watch it. I've seen clips on the internet, obviously. I'm not a big fan of the British monarchy. I'll say that much. Just not a big fan of the British monarchy, not a big fan of British imperialism. A lot of people think that I look like, I look like Prince Harry, or I look like them, right? The way my face is and the way my hair is with the red hair, I look like I could be a member of the British royal family, right? A lot of my members of my wife's family say that. They say, "Oh, Caleb, you found your own Prince Harry." I don't know. I never thought that when I was a kid growing up. No one ever made that analogy or whatever. But in my adult life, many of my wife's relatives seem to think I look like Prince Harry, or I don't know, Prince Charles, or I don't know. I don't keep track of them. I don't keep track of my British royals. I don't know my British royal gossip or whatever. I just don't know it. I don't. That's just not something I follow. But I feel like I do kind of look like him in a weird way. Like when I get old, I'm probably going to look like that guy. Right. I mean, I feel like I'm going to look like that dude when I get old. Like there's no way around it. Like if you look at the way my face is and the way my hair is and all of that, when I get old, I'm going to look like that dude. Where does this come from? I have red hair. That's it. Like Louis C.K. is bald. He's like chubby. Like we both have red hair and like the red goatee thing. I get this a lot. I don't get this. How do I look like Louis C.K.? I mean, my face is shaped completely differently, but I don't know. Maybe all redheads look the same, right? We're just like a different species, right? We redheads. It is true. We redheads, we experience pain differently than other people. We redheads, we burn, like the amount of sunburns I've had in my life. Oh my God, I've got marks on my legs and, on like the back of my neck, I've got like brown patches and, our skin is very sensitive to the sun. Another thing, I sneeze in the sunlight, which a lot of people cannot relate to, right? But if you're Irish, you don't have to have red hair, but it tends to be like Irish folks, people from Northern Europe, when it's too sunny outside, the sunlight makes you sneeze, ka-choo, ka-choo, right? And what that is that your eyes like kind of water up and it tickles your nose. And yeah, it's, there's certain things, that just being a red-haired guy, it just, you're different in some ways, right? One thing that I thought was amusing is when you're a kid, if you get angry, they're always like, "Oh, he's angry because of his red hair." Well, it's not that. You notice our anger because we flush differently than other people, right? We get red-faced quicker because our skin is so pale, right? So other people might get red-faced and you wouldn't notice, right? But if we, the slightest thing, that's why people are always complaining about my face being red on here. Well, I got a very red face. They talk about, in fact, some red-haired people get like patches of red skin on their face. Thank God I haven't had to deal with that. You know what I mean? But that's called rosacea, right? And that's a common skin condition for red-haired people, for Irish people. So there you go. There you go. We red-haired people. Funny red-haired story. And then we'll move on to the next thing since we're on this kick about red hair. When I was in Iran, I remember I was at some big like Islamic gatherings and, I went to a shrine or something like that. And remember I saw a bunch of red-haired people and I said, "Who are they?" And they said, "Oh, those are Caucasians." And I said, "Caucasians? Like they're white people? What do you mean?" Well, when they, there was a bunch of red-haired guys walking around. They said, "Oh yeah, people with red hair are called Caucasians." And I'm like, "Caucasians?" In America, Caucasian just means white people. But in Iran, Caucasians refers to people from the Caucasus Mountains. And apparently having red hair is an ethnic attribute of Caucasians. Not like white people, but people from the Caucasus Mountains. So there you go. There you go. And this is even more interesting. A lot of Chechens have red hair. Did you know this? In Chechnya, it's really common to have red hair. And apparently, a lot of the ISIS guys had red hair because they were Chechens. A lot of the ISIS fighters were Islamic extremists who'd been fighting against the Russian government, fled Chechnya, and ended up in Syria fighting for ISIS. And a lot of them were from Chechnya, and so they had red hair, and so a lot of the ISIS guys had huge red beards, and that's because they were Chechens. They were Caucasians. Did you know this? I never knew this. Red hair when I was a kid, people said, you must be from Ireland. That's all anyone ever said. Ireland. Oh, you're Irish. And I am Irish ethnically. On both sides, I'm Irish. So I'm an Irish American. I mean, it's like many, many generations back. But that's what I always thought. Red hair was Irish. But apparently, if you go way back, red-haired people come from the Caucasus Mountains. And so we are Caucasians, right? So if you see a red-haired person, you can say, that there looks to me like a Caucasian. Young man, you look like you may be a Caucasian. And you would be right. You would be right, right? Red-haired people tend to be Caucasian. So there you go. So there you go. There you go, right? That apparently red-haired people trace their gene of red hair back to the Caucasus Mountains. So I am, in fact, a Caucasian. And I would say I'm more Caucasians. I'm more Caucasian than many of you watching this. Right? I am more Caucasian than you. Is that a thing? Right? Is that a thing? I don't know. Can someone be more Caucasian? Right? I mean, is that a thing? Is that a thing? Right? Anyway, I don't know. I'm about to say something that'll get me in trouble. I'll frame it the wrong way and offend a bunch of people, and they'll clip it, and then they'll say Caleb's talking about the Aryan race supremacy or something, and I'm not talking about that. I'm certainly not talking about that. So there you go. Anyway, that was my reaction to Did You See the King's Coronation? Isn't it great how I can just take any topic and, the person who asked about that, I gave them an answer, but from there we started talking about red hair, and yeah, got wild. It got wild. Next question. Did you see Scott Ritter's book tour interview? I have not. I've seen a lot of Scott Ritter's material. I have not seen his latest material. I have not seen it, but I bet it was amazing. And I am a huge fan of Scott Ritter. I think he's awesome. I love sharing the podium with him. He's a great man. I love going on his podcast. He is awesome in so many ways. All right. Is the deep state turning on Joe Biden with all the leaks and whistleblowers? If so, who will be named the Democrat candidate? Well, Christian, it's a good question, but honestly, I doubt they're turning on Joe Biden. Right now, it looks like Joe Biden's going to win the election by default. Now, we got a long way for them to figure out something better than that, because no one's going to be happy with that. Right? If we get Biden-Harris for another 4 years, they're already so goddamn unpopular. And at that point, it'll just be so obvious that things are rigged. And maybe they're banking on that. Maybe they've determined, look, they're going full Bonapartist as a result of I feel like they're probably trying to see if they could find a better plan. But it looks like right now, the way the elections are set up is that Republican Party is too Trumpified. Most Republicans want Trump. Trump will be prevented from running or prevented from winning again. And the Republicans, anyone that they nominate who's not Trump is just not going to get the support. And the Democrats won't have any debates, and Biden will be the Democrat nominee, and he will win by default. That's the way it looks right now. And that sucks. And that's a bad formula for running a country, because at that point, it looks so obviously rigged. But at this point, it's so obviously rigged at this point. I feel like they have to have another plan up their sleeve. Maybe we'll all get Buttigieg mania in the coming months, right? We'll all just love Buttigieg. Can you imagine that? They tried it with Kamala Harris. It was bad enough. Well, maybe we'll have Buttigieg mania. They'll just start doing popular TV specials about how amazing Buttigieg is. Buttigieg will make a rap video or he'll rescue a kid from a burning building on live television or something, and then we'll all have Buttigieg mania. And I don't know. I hope not, but There you go. I feel like they have to have something better up their sleeve than this. But as things look right now, Christian, it looks like Biden will be the Democrat candidate, and Biden will be elected 4 more years because they won't allow Trump and the Republicans, and that sucks. That absolutely sucks. The fact they've already said no debates means they're probably already leaning toward that, which really sucks. And Tulsi Gabbard is talking about this is just to get Kamala Harris to be president. And I told you all about this. I wrote a whole book explaining that they are going to do everything they can to get Kamala Harris to be president. And this may be the only way they can do it. Joe is 80, and if he gets another 4 years, if he lives it out, that would be, a miracle, but Joe gets another 4 years and Kamala's the vice, and then he, chokes on a pretzel or his heart stops or whatever. And then we've got President Kamala Harris, and no one's bothered to look into her except for me. Yeah, it's wild, folks. It's wild. All right. Next question. The writer's strike. Is AI a threat to their job? I would argue as a writer, it is not, because I've seen what AI can do, and AI can churn out stuff. But in terms of, quality, AI can write jokes. It certainly can write jokes, but they're not jokes that make you laugh. It's AI, and that you still need a human touch for the kind of things that writers write, like late night television, stuff like that. You need a human touch for that kind of thing. AI is very good at like technical writing. It can write the instructions for a toy, or I don't know what is, for your new speaker system, right? If it has the instructions, AI can write that. So technical writing might be on its way out. But I am convinced that you need a human touch for writing. And, look, I don't necessarily, look, you need writers, writers having a union is not something I'm against. Right. They deserve to be compensated for the work that they do. And there's a lot of, they've really cheapened, the amount of money people get paid for articles, it used to be people would, writers who wrote for big newspapers could write 1 article a month and live off of that. Did you know that? There'd be writers who wrote for the New York Times. They'd write 1 article a month, or they wrote for some magazine or something, and they could live off that. Now, you get paid what, $100 an article, $50 an article. Everyone's writing everything for every blog. And like a lot of people just write for free just to build their resume. It's, being a writer used to be a very, there used to not be as many publications. There weren't a million blogs and all of that. And there were, certain newspapers, certain magazines that were widely circulated. To write for them was very hard and competitive. And if you got to write for them, you were carefully vetted, and then you were very well compensated. And those writers formed a guild. And, in order to write for one of these big publications, you had to be part of that guild, right, to make sure that no one was undercutting anybody else. And everyone got, and now with technology, with information technology, it's just not like that anymore. So there you go. All right. A few times in her book, The Rebel Girl, Elizabeth Gurley Flynn mentions excessive rank and fileism. And I'm not sure what she's referring to there. I'd have to see the context. Now, Elizabeth Gurley Flynn, for those of you who don't know, was an Irish American, a leader of the Industrial Workers of the World, a very well-known labor leader in New York City. She eventually joined the Communist Party, and she was a big leader of the Communist Party in the late 1930s and during the McCarthy period up into the 60s. She was just a very well-known American radical labor leader, a woman of Irish descent, very good speaker, was known for her soapboxing oratory skills. And I think when she refers to rank and fileism, she's talking about, if I'm not mistaken, I believe, and I could be wrong here, that she's referring to, pure and simple trade unionism, this notion that it's not about building a broader revolutionary movement. It's simply about building the unions, right? And that it's not about, you kind of lose perspective. She's probably referring to what Marx referred to when he said that labor unions should become organizing centers of the entire working class, not simply representing the needs of one particular group of workers in one particular workplace. What's the quote from Marx? Let me see if I can pull that up. Marx, unions, organizing centers of the entire working class. What does Marx say? Yeah. Where's the quote? Oh, this is, trying to see if I can find that quote. In addition to their original tasks, the trade unions must now learn how to act consciously as focal points for organizing the working class in the greater interests of its complete emancipation. They must support every social and political movement directed towards this aim. By considering themselves champions and representatives of the whole working class and acting accordingly, the trade unions must succeed in rallying around themselves all workers still outside their ranks. They must carefully safeguard the interests of the workers in the poorest paid trades, for example, the farm laborers who, due to especially unfavorable circumstances, have been deprived of their power of resistance. They must convince the whole world that their efforts are far from narrow and egoistic, but on the contrary, they are directed at the emancipation of the downtrodden masses. That's what Marx was talking about. The labor union should be an organizing center for the entire working class to fight for its emancipation, not just for the individual workers in one particular workplace. There you go. So someone says the CIA wrote a rock song by Scorpion. That's fascinating. I have not heard of this. CIA wrote a rock song by Scorpion. I know Scorpion, right? The Scorpions did not actually write Winds of Change. The CIA did. That is insane. Wind of Change, a song published in 1990 by Scorpion, was actually written by the CIA. That's crazy. And it's an anti-Soviet song. That's wild. That is wild. That is crazy. There's so many things like this. There's so many people that if you say the CIA, they go, oh boy, and they roll their eyes. It's like, this is right in front of our eyes. The Congress for Cultural Freedom, MK Ultra, all of this is public knowledge. And there's just so many people that if you mention this, they go, oh boy, you're one of those. I'm sure the CIA did that, Caleb. Oh, yeah, Caleb. The CIA overthrew a government. Yeah, that happens. The American government just goes around the world overthrowing other governments. Actually, yes, that happens. Oh, wow, Caleb. And I bet next you're going to tell me the CIA funds artists. Actually, yes, they do that. Oh, what next? Are you going to tell me there's like a rock song that was written by the CIA? Yes. Oh, what next? Are you going to say the CIA was like involved in the cocaine tree? Yes, I am. It's like, it's so annoying. It's really annoying when people just have this roadblock and it's like they have this thing in their mind. If something sounds like something I've been told is a conspiracy theory, must not think. And it's so annoying. And it's just like all their argument is that sounds like something. That's not an argument. Something sounds like something is not an argument. Did the CIA write this song or not? If the CIA did write it, if you can prove it, then it's true. It doesn't matter if it sounds like something. Did MK Ultra exist or not? Did the Congress for Cultural Freedom program exist or not? Right? And you just go, oh, yeah, Caleb, sure the CIA did that. Oh, it's like, ugh. Right? There's tons and tons of academic studies of this and all this. Oh, it's very infuriating, utterly infuriating. All right. Do all illiberals need to unite against liberalism? Well, Gavin, I wouldn't put it that way because when it really gets down to it, there's no such thing as liberalism. Liberalism is an illusion. Liberalism is a belief and it's an illusion, but all liberalism is propped up by illiberalism. The U.S. Army is a very illiberal institution. Think about it. Right? And every liberal institution is propped up by illiberalism. All human societies are illiberal to some degree. And like even what we're seeing now, right? They're preaching all this liberalism. Oh my God, we want to protect journalists. We want freedom of information. Look what they're doing to Julian Assange. That's not liberalism, right? Anyone's allowed to publish anything. Oh, unless they're Julian Assange. It's like liberalism doesn't really exist. It's a mindset. It's a viewpoint, but in terms of practice, it's never actually in existence. So because of that, like there are people who profess illiberalism. There are illiberal ideologies, but even liberal society is highly illiberal. And that is what the proponents of liberalism don't quite understand, is that even no matter how woke a society sounds, no matter how much it invokes human rights. I mean, RT is illegal in Russia now, or not in Russia, in the European Union countries. How liberal is that? How freedom of the press is that? Right? There's many examples of this. Liberalism protects itself from people that are illiberal by being illiberal against them. Right? I mean, liberalism, it's like a dog chasing its tail. Right? It's like, well, we believe in freedom, democracy, and open society, no truth, no ideology imposed on society. So therefore, we have to impose this on people who would oppose this, right? Because we believe in open societies, we have to shut down RT so that RT's ideas don't come here and prevent us from being open to all ideas. Do you see what I'm saying? It's like, wait, hold up. Wait. So the point is we're supposed to have a free and open society where there's all ideas are on the table, right? So in order to do that, we have to outlaw certain ideas. Because if these certain ideas come, then we won't be a free and open society. But I thought if we're a free and open society to begin with, why do we outlaw these ideas? Do you see? It's like a dog eating its tail. There's no such thing as liberalism. There's no such thing as liberalism. There are at some points more freedom than others. I would argue that in any society, freedom and civil liberties is based on the level of security and the level of economic development. No society anywhere in the world had freedom of speech or freedom of religion or freedom of association until like the 1400s in Europe. And that wasn't because people were just evil until then. It was because it was based on a level of stability and economic development. There you go. And that liberalism is an illusion. Because liberal societies, during the Cold War, it was the communists or these authoritarian regimes. Yeah, they had Pinochet, they had Park Chung-hee in South Korea. They had all kinds of authoritarian regimes. And then those authoritarian regimes after the Cold War were a threat to liberalism. So they cleared them out and replaced them with governments that just kind of fall over. That, liberals don't really believe in liberalism. It's just something that they profess. It is the ideology of the West to counter anyone who gets in their way. They accuse anyone who gets in their way of being illiberal, but they are illiberal themselves. They just don't preach it. Other societies preach illiberalism. They preach nationalism. They preach communism. They preach Islam. They preach Christian socialism, Bolivarianism. The West preaches liberalism. It does not practice liberalism. And when it gets down to it, it will throw liberalism in the toilet when necessary. Liberalism is just an ideological message that the West espouses. It is a propaganda vehicle. Well, we don't stand for anything in the West. We just stand for open debate, open freedom. Right? They say the people who are the most propagandized cannot recognize propaganda. I don't know if you've ever heard that before, but those who are most propagandized cannot recognize propaganda, but they accuse anything that goes against their viewpoint of being propaganda. And that's the liberal society, right? Everything that disagrees with the United States, disagrees with CNN or mainstream media is propaganda. And we look at CNN and they say, oh, that's not propaganda. It gives us one side of everything. I will never forget when I was working at the UN Press Corps. I was there with Press TV, and I would be at these receptions with the other journalists stationed at the UN. I would talk to people who went to Harvard, people who went to Yale, the smartest. These must be at the top of their class in journalism. It's brilliant people. I would talk to them. They were dumb as shit. They had no idea there was another side to the war in Syria. No idea there was another side to the Ukraine events. These are the smartest people, right? I'm a fool. I just went to stupid Baldwin Wallace College in Ohio. These people went to Harvard and Yale, and they're writing for the New York Times and CBS, and and these are like, this is supposed to be like, the Wall Street Journal. These are the sophisticated people, and none of them had any clue that there was any other side of the story to international events. And they were the UN reporters for these big news agencies. They had no clue. You talk to these people, the notion that there are two sides to these conflicts just completely went over their heads. And that's why I hate the American education system so much. Let me rant about this, right? Got some time. My whole life, I was told by my parents and by my aunts and uncles and cousins and all of them, oh, Caleb, you're going to love college. You're going to love college. Oh, college is going to be so amazing, Caleb. Wait till you get to college, Caleb. College sucked. It was awful. And I hated college. But the reason that my aunts and uncles and all of them told me I was going to love college is because college used to be different. College used to be a place that people went. It was like the place where it was allowed, the one little place where you could learn that there's two sides to every story, right? And most of America, love it or leave it, whatever. But on the college campuses, that was where you kind of started to learn there's another side to it, right? That's where the protesters were, the Vietnam War protesters were. College was supposed to be a little more open-minded. It ain't like that no more. It used to be, but it's not. Now, college is where they go to vet you, to make sure you deserve a spot in their middle class, in their managerial class. College is where they go to vet you. And college, I would argue the colleges are more authoritarian, more in line with the State Department than average Americans are. You go to any working class community in America, you're going to find people that don't think we should be in these wars. You're going to find people that support Donald Trump, people who think that the American government is lying to people who, think the elections are rigged, etc. Not on a college campus, you won't find that. Oh, no. On the college campus, you'll find a whole lot of people who worked very, very hard to learn the party line, to never question anything. I hated college. Some of my professors really liked me. I liked some of my professors, but the atmosphere in the university was horrible. College is a scam at this point. You don't get a better job because of it. I can't think of any job I've ever had that I got because of my college experience. I'll just be honest with you. I worked at the insurance company. That wasn't from college. Worked at call centers before that. Wasn't from college. Worked in like gas stations before that. It wasn't from college. Worked in alternative media. Worked for Ramsey Clark. That wasn't from college. My college experience, it was a colossal waste of money. And the payout wasn't there. Now, I know for some people, like if you want to be a teacher, you have to go to college, right? Because you can't be a teacher unless you have a degree. Okay. There are some jobs that it is just straight up required. Okay, fine. But most of us now work in the gig economy. You don't need to go to college for a gig economy job. And a lot of the gig economy stuff people do, graphic design, web design, you teach yourself. You're not going to learn that in college. You got to learn it yourself. You got to just make yourself learn it. Learn to code, as they say. College is a scam, and it makes me angry. It makes me angry because I know that I'm a very intelligent person. You know, I know that I'm an intelligent person. I know that I have something to contribute. But if it wasn't for Russia and China, if it wasn't for the anti-imperialist countries of the world, if it wasn't for this audience of all of you, I would have fallen straight through the cracks of this society. America has no place for me. You know, think about that, right? And there's probably people on here who feel the exact same way. You're an intelligent human being. You're way smarter than your typical college professor who has no clue there's like another side to the war in Ukraine. But America has no place for you. That sucks. Makes me angry. The American education system is evil. There's no place for intelligent human beings in it. It is a place to learn to be stupid, right? When I was in college, we used to joke, so-and-so is so dumb they got straight A's, because the people who got straight A's in college were the dumbest people. They would just learn to be easily programmed, right? And you couldn't engage with them intellectually. You couldn't have a conversation with them. And those were the ones who got straight A's because they were stupid. You know, I really hate the American educational system with a passion. I hate the American educational system. It's a scam to steal people's money. It is a lie. It is not a place promoting free thought. It is a place that people who actually want to learn about the world in order to change it get penalized for that. It rewards stupidity. It rewards people that are not interested in learning. American education is awful. It is evil. It is horrible. And there's no room for you in America. You know, there is no room for you in America if you actually care, right? If you actually want to learn things. The people who rise up in America are the people that I sat next to at the UN who were dumb as shit. And I'm like, oh, that's why you rose up. I was miserable in college. I didn't do well in college. You, on the other hand, you're dumb as shit. And that's why you went to Harvard, and that is, it infuriates me. It makes me really angry. Everything I've been told, everything is just a lie. And there's probably many of you watching this who feel the same way I do. This whole thing, I'll just go on this ramble. A lot of the communist groups encourage people to drop out of school. They do. And I don't, by the way. Anyone watching this, I am not encouraging you to drop out of school. Let me repeat, I am not. Make your own choices about life. If you think staying in school will help you get a better place in life, whatever. But a lot of the communist groups that I was around when I was in college would encourage people to drop out of school. And I look at that and I feel like, that was like this awful thing. That was like, oh, they're being cultish. They're being blah, 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 And I look back at that now and be like, what if I had dropped out of school? What if instead of spending 4 years in college, I had spent 1 year in college and then just, worked for a communist group after that? Would I be any worse off? Well, I'd have spent tens of thousands of dollars less money. It's like many, many, many people with degrees don't know shit and don't benefit from it. Don't benefit from the degree. It's evil. American education is not education. It's evil. I want you to think. I want to awaken you with these streams. I actually want to learn. I actually want to understand the world around me. I'm very interested in world events. And I don't understand. I'll be honest, I have nightmares sometimes about going back to school. Isn't that weird? You would think of all the things to have nightmares about. I sometimes have a nightmare that I end up having to go back to college because I talk to people that I know who are currently in college. I wouldn't be able to handle it. They sit there and they come from their global politics class and they tell me the things their professor said about the war in Ukraine and Taiwan and Venezuela, and my head wants to explode. And I'm like, if you put me in a situation where I had to pretend somebody that stupid was smarter than me, I would lose my shit. Right? I'm sorry, but any situation where they're putting someone in front of a group of people as a smart person who thinks Putin invaded Ukraine because he's trying to restore the Soviet Union because he's evil and he just hates Ukrainians on an ethnic level. Anyone who thinks that. I mean, and you have to sit there and pretend this is an intelligent human being. You have to sit there and go, oh, well, actually, teacher, I disagree. Please don't drop my grade. I can't. You know what I mean? I really can't. Education, I mean, it's like you get rewarded for being stupid in America. You know, to be fair, I bet this isn't true in like sciences, right? In like math, science, engineering, that kind of thing. This probably isn't true. Fair enough. But English, the humanities, the social sciences, you know, it's a joke. It is a joke. It is a sick joke. It is a sick joke. And honestly, I think part of the reason I was unhappy in college is I took it seriously. I cared about the topics we were learning about and stuff. And most of the people there didn't, which, to be honest, they were right, because you're not there to learn anything. You're just there to, you know, to learn to vomit back to them what they want and try and learn not to think critically and learn to repeat. And if you're really good at repeating, you move up the ranks. And if you're somebody who actually cares about the topic or does your own research, they don't want you there, you know, and you get punished for it. And that's why I absolutely hate the American educational system. It is a joke. It is utterly a joke. It is utterly a joke. And, you know, I mean, I'm not telling anyone to drop out of school, but I look back on that and all the drama with my parents and communist groups and all this, are you going to drop out of school and all that? I look back on that and I think, like, you know, what if I had? You know, what if I had? You know, I mean, it's just, we're at the point that, you know, I mean, it's just educate. What does a college degree get you in America? I mean, get a college degree in engineering, then you can be an engineer, right? You get a college degree and you want to be a teacher, you know, okay, you need a degree to be a teacher, but a lot of things nowadays, you know, I mean, and this is where increasingly I agree with conservatives. Like, it's weird. I hated Republicans when I was a teenager. I mean, I'm not conservative. I'm a communist, for Christ's sakes. But I mean, I'm at the point where, you know, I mean, the conservatives want to stop the wars. Conservatives think the U.S. media is lying. Tucker Carlson was on Fox News. I mean, I'm at the point where it's just like, you know, the left is so synthetic and so bullshit. And people on the right still think right and wrong exists. You know, that like they haven't completely given up on morality. And yeah, we're in a weird moment in American history. I am a leftist. I believe we can achieve the ultimate goal of a stateless, classless world. That is what I believe. But I realized it took me going all the way to Iran and the Gulf of Aden to realize that my communism was rooted in Christianity. And that's a topic for another night. We'll talk about that another night when I'm prepared. But I mean, I've talked about that before on here, but we'll talk about it in more depth another night. But, you know, yeah, I mean, I'm conservative in my own way, but I'm not an American conservative. I'm illiberal. I am illiberal, like most of humanity. I don't believe human beings are just animals. We're not just hogs and sheep that need to be managed. I don't believe that deep down we're all Adolf Eichmanns waiting to happen. We're not all a bunch of Nazis. I don't believe that historical progress is hopeless. I believe in the human race, and I believe in the power of people to come together and build a better world. And I think Russia and China, the Soviet Union and the People's Republic of China, the Cuban Revolution, the Venezuelan Bolivarian Project, or, you know, Gaddafi and Islamic socialism in Libya are all great examples of that. So, you know, I do believe in human beings coming together to get beyond the irrationality of greed and individualism and build societies up. I do believe in socialism. So there you go. All right, folks, that's our show for tonight. It's been fun. It's been fun. I'm going to put on the closing music. You think you would be a good lawyer? Someone's asking me in the chat. I don't. Do upsurge. No. in the struggle against U.S. imperialism is now emerging throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression. But the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. And while the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today.